somewhere right now. Someone is sitting in front of their laptop. They just finished a book on personal finance. Third one this year. They understand compound interest. They know what an index fund is. They've tracked their spending for 3 months straight. Their savings account has been at the same number for 7 months, and they don't know why. They tell themselves it's the rent, or the cost of living, or that they just need to wait for a raise. None of those things are the real reason. The real reason is older than any of that. Before any of us learned what a savings account was, we were already absorbing lessons about money, not in classrooms, in half-heard conversations, in the way the adults around us talked or went quiet when bills arrived, in phrases that repeated so many times we stopped noticing them as phrases. Behavioral economists call them invisible scripts, sentences about money absorbed so early that you've stopped asking whether they're true. And here is what makes them genuinely dangerous. They don't disappear when you learn better information. They sit underneath the knowledge, quietly overriding it every time you try to act. There are 5 of them. Each one sounds completely reasonable. Each one has a specific calculable cost. And they don't work in isolation. They reinforce each other, one feeding the next, making the trap tighter with every year you carry them. By the time you've heard all 5, you'll see why they don't stack. They multiply. And a script you can name has already lost half its power. The first one is the most elegant trap ever constructed. You've heard some version of this sentence growing up. Money corrupts. Wealth changes people. Rich people are different from us, and not in ways you'd admire. But here is what it does inside your brain. If wealth is associated with becoming someone you don't respect, someone greedy, disconnected, fundamentally altered, then accumulating wealth is not a goal. It's a threat to your identity. And your brain, above almost everything else, will protect your sense of who you are. So it puts an invisible ceiling on what you allow yourself to have. You don't decide to do this. It's not a conscious choice. But you notice it in small ways. A vague discomfort after a financial win. A tendency to spend money you just saved on something that feels like giving back. It also surfaces in a specific, concrete way. Asking for more money, in a raise conversation, in a negotiation, is an act of claiming that you deserve more wealth. And if accumulating wealth means becoming that person, the claim feels dangerous. The ask triggers the script, so you don't make it. And if you do, you feel uncomfortable in a way you can't quite name. Researchers at Carnegie Mellon studied this exact pattern. Professionals who never negotiate their salary earn, on average, $1 million less over a 45-year career than those who do, controlling for industry, role, and experience level. Not because they lack information. Most of them know they're underpaid. The script makes the ask feel like a threat to who they are. The cost of staying comfortable with yourself, $1 million. And this script doesn't stand alone. A person who believes money corrupts is also very likely to carry the second one. This one is quieter. It doesn't feel like a belief. It feels like self-awareness. I've never been good with numbers. I've always struggled to save. I'm just not wired that way. It sounds like honesty. It functions as a sentence that ends the conversation before it starts. But there is a distinction that changes everything. Being bad with money is not a trait. It is a skill gap. Managing money is a learnable skill, in the same way reading is a learnable skill, or driving, or cooking. Nobody emerges from childhood knowing how to build a savings rate. It is either taught or it isn't. Carol Dweck's decades of research at Stanford on fixed versus growth mindset documented what happens when you treat a skill as an identity trait. It produces learned helplessness. Not just reluctance, but a complete shutdown of effort. The brain stops trying entirely, because effort without belief in improvement is just exposure to failure. Why attempt something you believe is impossible for a person like you? This is why the person carrying this script doesn't automate a monthly transfer to an investment account. Not because they can't. They could set it up in 4 minutes. But learned helplessness says the effort won't matter, so the 4 minutes never happen. Here is what those 4 minutes are worth. $200 per month, automated from age 30 to 65, at the market's historical average return of 7%, compounded monthly. Total contribution, $84,000. Value at 65 by $360,000. That gap, $276,000, is not the cost of ignorance. It is the cost of 3 words: I'm not good. And if you believe you'll always be bad with money, the third script arrives right on schedule to give you permission to confirm it. This one disguises itself as balance. It sounds like self-care. You've tracked every dollar this week. You've cooked instead of ordering out. You've passed the same pair of shoes online 4 times without clicking. And now, Friday night. A dinner that costs the equivalent of 1 month of discipline. You deserve it. You only live once. It doesn't make sense to save everything and never enjoy anything. Here is the brutal truth. What your brain calls deserving has nothing to do with the object. Roy Baumeister at Florida State documented ego depletion. Willpower is a finite cognitive battery. Every decision, every act of self-control, every moment of resisting something Monday through Thursday costs a small amount of that resource. By Friday night, you are empty. And the entire consumer economy knows this. They are waiting for you at 7 p.m. When your willpower drops, your brain screams for relief from the tension of being responsible. Treat yourself is that relief. You are not purchasing the item. You are purchasing a temporary anesthetic for the anxiety of financial restraint. The receipt is the price of that anesthetic. In the previous scripts, I gave you the math. I told you what it costs in dollars. Let's break the pattern here because dollars don't hurt enough. Add up those I deserve it purchases. For most people, it's about $225 a month. But what are you actually paying? Every time you swipe for that Friday night relief, you aren't just losing $225. You are mathematically adding 1 full month to the years you have to work before you can retire. You are trading your future freedom for 45 minutes of present-day anesthetic. That is not the cost of enjoying yourself. That is the cost of letting the system monetize your exhaustion. Which perfectly sets up the 4th script. The delay. Hal Hirschfield at UCLA ran brain imaging studies on how people process their future selves. The result was terrifying. When participants thought about who they would be in 10 years, the neural activity looked nearly identical to thinking about a stranger, not a future version of themselves, a different person entirely, someone they'd never met. This is not procrastination. It is neurological delegation. You are assigning your entire financial survival to someone your brain has literally categorized as a stranger, and strangers do not show up to pay your bills. I am not going to give you another standard compound interest math lesson here. You already know the math. Instead, I want you to look at the penalty of this delegation. Waiting just 10 short years from age 25 to 35 to let things settle down doesn't just delay your wealth. It amputates it. It permanently slices over $500,000 off your final net worth. You didn't save effort by waiting. You effectively paid a $562,000 fee to let a stranger handle your life. And now you have 4 scripts feeding each other. The ceiling, the helplessness, the relief valve, the delegation. But none of them would survive if it wasn't for the 5th one. This is the script that closes the loop, and it's the one nobody talks about, which is exactly how it survives. In most families, money is not discussed. The unspoken rule is that it's inappropriate, private. You don't ask what someone earns. You don't bring up debt. You figure it out quietly, on your own. Researchers call this financial socialization silence. Because you were never shown what normal looks like, your brain creates massive blind spots. The result is total isolation. And isolation is the only environment where invisible scripts can survive. When you cannot talk about money, you cannot calibrate your reality against someone who has already solved the exact problem you're carrying. You are entirely alone with your scripts. You might be waiting for me to give you the specific dollar cost of this 5th script, like I did with the others. But I can't, because this script doesn't have a price tag. It is a multiplier. This 5th script doesn't cost you money on its own. It protects the other 4 from ever being destroyed. You cannot correct a belief you aren't allowed to name out loud. You cannot update a financial pattern if you are forced to hide it. The first 4 scripts built the cage. The 5th script is the lock. When you combine them, the invisible ceiling on your identity, the learned helplessness, the Friday night exhaustion tax, and the delegation to a stranger, and you lock them inside a vault of silence. You aren't just making a mistake. You are executing a perfectly designed system of self-sabotage. Add up the raw costs. Conservative estimate, you are bleeding $3 million in lifetime wealth, and you are doing it because of sentences you absorbed before you were old enough to ride a bike. The 5 scripts do not operate independently. They form a system. Each one makes the next more likely. Each reinforces the others. And together, they explain something that should be impossible. Why someone who understands compound interest, who has read the books, who knows exactly what they should do, still ends up with the same number in their savings account, month after month, unable to explain why. The knowledge was never the problem. It was never going to be. These sentences were installed before you were capable of evaluating them. You did not choose them, but mechanisms once named can be interrupted. A study at UCLA led by Matthew Lieberman showed that labeling an unconscious pattern, what the researchers called affect labeling, reduces its emotional grip by activating the prefrontal cortex. When you name the script, you give the rational part of your brain a handle on something the thought was previously running below awareness. The script doesn't vanish, but it stops running on autopilot. You cannot know your way out of a script, but you can name your way out. The person at the beginning of this video, sitting in front of their laptop, 3rd finance book this year, savings account unchanged for 7 months. Their problem was never the knowledge. They already had enough. What they were missing was a name for the thing running underneath it. Now they have 5. If one of these landed harder than the others, and for most people, one of them does, leave it in the comments. Not because it's a poll, because naming it out loud, even in a comment, is the first step in the mechanism. And if this is the kind of thing you want to keep understanding, the behavior underneath the math, subscribe. I'll be here.